So to kick things off, we've got a great panel, people disrupting big, interesting industries, and I'd like to ask each of our panelists to give a quick introduction and tell us a bit about their company. So Luke, please.
Sure. Hi everybody, I'm Luke Schneider. It's a pleasure to be here. It's always great to talk to folks about our company, but about the passion I've got for working in a disruptive fashion in some incumbent industries. I'm the CEO of a company called Silvercar, which is the way we would say it is it's really a reimagining of the airport car rental experience. We have ported what is traditionally a very analog and paper-based process into the mobile domain. And the idea is pretty simple. It takes a page out of the Southwest Airlines book by offering a single make model combination of car. In our case, it's Audi's 2013 A4 in silver. But that's the single vehicle we offer, so it takes the surprise and the disappointment potentially out of the experience. And then we take the lines and the counters and the waiting out of it by moving it over to the mobile domain, literally connecting with the vehicle and with the traveler so that the experience can be seamless and frictionless and rather enjoyable, we like to think, instead of something that can very frequently be frustrating.
Excellent. Next up, Jennifer Scorpio from Getaround.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessica Scorpio.
Jessica, sorry.
One of the founders of Getaround. We are solving a big problem that we call car overpopulation. Essentially, there's 1 billion cars on the planet that sit idle 22 hours out of the day. And so what we're doing is we're connecting car owners with people who would like access to a car. You can rent anything from a Tesla Roadster to a Prius and anything in between. Getaround provides the insurance and the technology to make it easy and fun. Before Getaround, I founded a non-for-profit startup called Ideal, which worked to connect young leaders with experts in their field, and I worked for the Prime Minister of Canada as a brand marketer and speechwriter.
Excellent. Next up, I'd like to ask Jared Simon to introduce himself, but I'll also tell you just a little fun fact about him. Has anyone seen the First Round Capital holiday video that we do every year? There was an elevator scene with someone dancing in a little risque manner, and it was Jared right here. So
in the flesh.
Well done.
In the flesh. I wasn't wearing my glasses in that scene. My name is Jared. I run hotel relationships and operations for Hotel Tonight. Hotel Tonight, we're taking advantage of what we see as a mismatch, a long-standing mismatch between sort of the fundamental human interest in instant gratification and the lack of tools to realize that instant gratification. And particularly in the hotel industry where we work, it's a situation where hotels generally run at 60% occupancy. So there's always the availability to fulfill that need for instant gratification, and we're trying to do that.
Excellent. So I want to introduce a slightly different panel format. Instead of just asking questions and everyone going down answering the same one each time, what I've done is created a number of questions that are more or less statements, and I've asked the panelists to each pick one and really agree with it or disagree and sort of take a side, and then we'll get other feedback from the other panelists. And if you are so inspired or have a question or a point of view on it, give a holler. We will have Q&A that you can potentially do during a question, or we can save about 5 minutes at the end for a little bit more of that. So I'd like to start it off with Luke. If you could give me a number, and I'll tee up that question.
I'll take number 1.
You got it. So here it is. So to disrupt, technology has to really surprise and delight customers, not just simply perform. Agree or disagree?
I think I disagree with that. I feel like I should form my response in the form of a question.
Okay, yeah, it's
Jeopardy-like. That's an interesting one, because I think a lot of times when companies set out to disrupt, you have a very bold vision, and you really want to sort of come out of the gates hard charging and fighting against some pretty established companies. And at the end of the day, what I found really matters, and I think what we believe at Silvercar especially, is that the experience that your customers go through has to surprise and delight. You have to be much more happy with this new upstart and innovative experience than you are with the existing one. And in some cases, technology, if it does surprise and delight, and it does provide some sort of aspect of the experience that is truly different, it can really be sticky, and it can really have, you know, that kind of lasting effect on a customer. But in many cases, and I would say probably the majority of cases, technology just needs to perform. It needs to take care of issues that arise in, you know, sort of the legacy baggage of an incumbent industry. And, you know, as a result, if the technology itself can reduce friction, disruptive companies tend to capture value.
Let me follow up on that with Jared. So I know firsthand people who use Hotel Tonight tend to be surprised and delighted with the experience. Is that a critical part of your success, or is it more how many hotels and the prices and that type of thing?
Yeah, I think that I'll sort of agree and disagree with Luke. I think that I read that statement differently. I read it more broadly, that the service and the process and the product need to surprise and delight. Certainly the technology is kind of a slave to whatever you're trying to accomplish, but if you're not surprising and delight, I mean, it seems to me that disruption is synonymous with surprise and delight. Otherwise, you're just doing what is existing today. And I think Hotel Tonight in particular, it's not necessarily the technology that's surprising and delighting. In fact, in the beginning, the technology was pretty inelegant in the background. But the experience of being able to book a hotel in 10 seconds and show up there and, you know, immediately was pretty surprising for a lot of people. And that is what separated us, we think, from the sort of legacy players in the industry.
Great. Jessica, anything to add, or do you want to pick another question?
I would just say that to disrupt, it needs to work. And so I think performance is key, and making it simple is better than trying to be all flashy and really surprising people and being delightful. I think what it ends up being, the disruptive companies that really go viral or take it to the next level, have some fun way of surprising people. So it's almost like it has to work. That's the bare minimum. It has to be better than what exists.
What do you think that hook is with Getaround?
So with Getaround, we're basically letting people unlock pretty much any car they may be walking by on the street with their iPhone. And that could be a Tesla Roadster. That could be just a car that you see across the street. And so that's such a different idea. The fact that you don't have to go rent a car at the airport, or the fact that you don't have to be a member of a car sharing organization, that you can download the app and within 5 minutes be driving that car, is how we surprise and delight.
Great. Do you want to tee up your question?
Sure. I'll go with number 2.
You're going in order. Okay.
Yes.
For the early stage disruptive business, capital is still the biggest entry barrier and really the only true way to reduce risk. So how important, capital is really important, agree or disagree?
So capital could either be an enabler or kind of constrain the company. I think for disruptive businesses, because most of them are going after such a big space, in some ways you need it to be able to play and compete. I think a lot of disruptive businesses are going up against government or regulation, and so to seem a little bit more established is important. A lot of disruptive businesses now are being fairly proactive with legislation and government lobbying. I don't think it's a requirement. In some ways, I think if you're being disruptive, you have to have a bootstrapping mentality, which is what we've always done with Getaround. But capital definitely helps.
So let me ask it for the other two panelists. Do you need to raise your big Series A before you can really know if you've got something, or can you just get, you know, an app out and see if customers like it before you pour on the fuel?
Yeah. You know, I think timing does matter. I think that the table stakes, as we were sort of talking about with the first question, is that it's got to work, right? It's just, you sort of have to prove that you literally can create a disruptive model that will then scale and take on an industry. But, you know, on the capital question, my experience has been that when you're taking on an incumbent industry, typically these are well-established, well-heeled, and you know, highly organized groups. You're going to fight wars of attrition, you know, as well as those targeted battles and skirmishes, you know, to get a specific segment or a specific group of people. So it kind of depends on the industry, but at the end of the day, if you're going to take on somebody really big and really well capitalized, I think most of the time capital does matter, and you need to be able to survive through economic upswings and downswings, as well as those long, hard-fought battles in the markets that you really covet.
Chair, you've raised a fairly significant amount of money in a relatively short period of time. What do you think?
Yeah, my experience is very different, and we're not in an industry where we're dealing with government regulation, and that may be the difference. And it may just be self-fulfilling, right? I've selected sort of things to do or companies to start that don't face that situation. In most cases, in my experience, we are certainly facing companies that have deep pockets and are very, very well resourced, but there's no chance that we're going to be able to defeat them by trying to out-resource them. So we need to find a better way. And at Hotel Tonight, for instance, we built and launched the app before we raised the dime. We built it with 2 people building it, and me going around and knocking on hotel doors, and in 3 months. So it's possible to do that, and I think that, frankly, set the stage for our advantage. Or our sort of sustainable cultural advantage, at least, in terms of being scrappy and figuring out creative solutions. And again, that may just be the space that we're in. It allows for that, but certainly we're facing a lot of very well-resourced competitors that if we tried to compete with them on the same playing field, there's no chance. And they're allowing a very big playing field to compete with them because the product, frankly, isn't all that interesting on their side.
Yep. Great. So you're up next. Do you have a question in mind?
I'll skip.
Good.
I'll go out of order
Please
just to
do.
shake it up a little bit. I'll go to number 5.
Great. Okay. So the statement is determining your top mobile marketing priority is a very complicated decision for app developers.
I will again, speaking to our experience, I would strongly disagree with this statement. I don't think that it's complicated at all, and the reason I don't think it's complicated is because in the mobile ecosystem, as opposed to in the legacy online, PC-based ecosystem, there's no Google, there's no indexing well or spending your way to the top or anything like that. I mean, there's some ways, but they're not sustainable. The only way that you create a sustainable marketing advantage is by building a quality product. Because a quality product begets good reviews beget more downloads beget higher in the list, and it's a virtuous cycle. And there's very little sustainable way to break that cycle or to try to work around that cycle. So it's a very, very easy prioritization for us. Invest in the product.
How do the other panelists think about what were your top mobile marketing priorities? Was it a tough process?
You want to take it?
Sure. We don't actually do a ton of mobile marketing, so I think purely the question can be hard for app developers to decide if they should do mobile marketing or not. I think different apps, there's a clear opportunity of where you should be marketing. Other ones, you don't necessarily need it. We've had the benefit of growing a lot from word of mouth and basically our community spreading it, PR when we launch different markets. As we grow on different mobile platforms, we'll probably explore it, but we haven't needed it as much.
Got it. Let me tee off. You talked about leaderboards and a process for getting seen. I'll pick a question I think is related here. A statement. Leaderboards are an accurate reflection of popularity and they cannot be gamed. Agree or disagree?
They can be gamed a little bit, but again, I don't think it's sustainable. I think that the leaderboards are important, again, because if you're at the top of that sort when someone searches for a hotel or a car or something like that, there's a high likelihood that you're going to be the downloaded app, and that's the key in the equation. So it's vital, and again, the only sustainable way to get there is to build a great product.
Great. Any other thoughts, or do you have your next question teed up?
No, I would tend to agree with that. I just think that over time, things that provide a lot of value tend to rise to the top. I guess that's a fairly time-worn statement, but and I think we have a healthy amount of cynicism, towards the accuracy of a lot of things that rate apps. But at the end of the day, word of mouth is really good, and those tend to rise to the top. Gosh, in terms of the next question?
Yeah, got one?
Sure. Why don't we do number 4?
Okay. So this one has to do with probably a couple of you. Government policy and industry regulation is a serious threat to would-be disruptors. Is that true in your world? I think airports have a lot of regulation. Is that right?
They do. They do. Yeah, we spent a lot of time trying to figure this out, to be honest with you. It's kind of interesting when you look at, certainly in our industry, the consolidation of power into the hands of a relatively small number of companies tends to raise their overall influence on things. But the other day I was reading about Google's $25 million lobbying effort, essentially to try to maintain its position and avoid some antitrust noise. And and at the same time, I've been watching sort of the patent battles being fought in IP, in the mobile and in the general technology space. And then I was reading an interesting article the other day of somebody who just said, if the president just replaced every time he said the word innovation with entrepreneurship or entrepreneurs, then they'd have it right. And I think that as technology outpaces government's ability to regulate and control and do its job, right, and really try to protect consumers and make sure that folks are well represented, that we do run up against some pretty hard barriers. Some areas where if you're not extremely well-heeled, you don't have the ability to influence government. And that's another thing that's been said is that an investment in lobbying is probably got the single largest ROI of any investment you could make. So as a small company, as a disruptor, as somebody who's trying to change an incumbent industry and something that is very, very regulated in our case and very entrenched and is kind of even in Jessica's case, the result of maybe 100 years or more of Madison Avenue advertising and government support for a big manufacturing industry, yeah, I do think it can be a threat,
So Jessica, you're having people drive each other's cars, and you've worked in government before. What's your take on how important this is?
Sure. So I don't think government regulation poses a real barrier to disruption. I think if you're going to disrupt a big industry, you have to come with that mindset. And I think we've seen great examples of companies get really big and do really well without addressing it at the front end. So if you look at Airbnb, if you look at Uber, companies that are providing great services that have communities that love them, they got big and then they actually leverage your community to address it. So if you can do that, that's great. We knew that our business model was a little different, that we were going to be fairly geographic specific and regional. And we also knew that there was a good foundation laid around positive kind of support for car sharing. So we actually, at the state, city, and federal level, built kind of relationships that actually helped us grow. So for example, we got a $1.7 million grant to launch in Portland and do a car sharing study on peer-to-peer car sharing, since it's such a new thing.
They did that with bicycles in Portland a decade ago.
Mm-hmm. And we've definitely seen, like, we've gotten laws passed to help protect our business, but that's because we kind of knew that we would grow a little bit slower than a pure web business.
Yeah.
You've also done a really good job of defining your business around a government interest, which is, the environment. Which is a great idea and a great way to sort of co-opt sort of the political sort of wins to get what you need.
Yeah, well, that's not only marketing, that's kind of
No,
part of our
I'm not
values.
suggesting that, but it's a great, it's worked well.
Yeah. But I think if you look at some of the biggest disruptors from, a PayPal, Airbnb, even Uber, they've tended to push boundaries and then figure it out and make it work after the fact. It tends to be better to ask forgiveness and figure it out later than permission up front. Just to note, we have only about 5 minutes left, so if there's a question you'd like to ask of the panel, please raise your hand and let the folks with microphones know. I'm going to flip it, because I'm just to a more direct question to fill in the blanks here. What's your perspective on the 3 most important mobile platforms to develop on? Give them in order and give your list.
Man, they all have really distinct advantages that are very different. It's hard to put them in order. I mean, the iOS platform is the flashiest, and it's the sexiest for recruiting, and it's the sexiest for those kinds of things. And it's for us, we've been on both Android and iOS for a while now, and it's still the preponderance. iOS is still the preponderance of the transactions. I mean, I've seen studies that suggest that iOS users are more transactional, so maybe that's true. The Android platform is fantastic because it allows us to experiment much more quickly and much more nimbly, because there isn't the whole infrastructure that would approve or reject our updates. And in addition, if you can get promoted via the Play Store or something like that, the reach is unbelievable. It's mind-boggling what that does to traffic when we've gotten featured there.
So is there an obvious third choice?
Not for us yet.
Okay.
Unless you consider tablet a third, iPad, I suppose, has been really valuable for us.
Got it. How about you guys?
So we focus most of our efforts on iPhone, iOS, and then mobile web. So we basically had good skills on iPhone, so we built that out and used that to basically set the standard. And then basically the mobile web being totally scalable lets it work for anyone.
And I'm gonna, I guess in prior lives, we let the customers decide, and we just essentially asked them, what are you guys using? And that was the one that was the most important one to develop on. In Silvercar, we actually didn't make that choice. We actually began developing on 3 separate platforms at the same time, on iOS, on Android, as well as a mobile web platform, simply because we didn't really have an audience to pull when we began. And I think that's really the most important thing is just trying to figure out what do people use, and the answer is just simply what your core demographic likes to use.
You talked about developers are attracted to one platform more than the other. Have you all done your development internally, or have you looked for other, external sources, and is that a tough, important decision?
Critical core competence. We do that internally, and we invest in it heavily.
Yeah.
Internal.
Agree.
Great. Good. We didn't have any. Do you have any questions there? We have one from the front. Sorry, please.
Hello.
Yes.
So I'm here today to write to a French audience. So I have a question for you, Luc. I think we're very miserable when we arrive to an airport, and I would enjoy to use Silvercar. That's a great idea. But I know you raise 11 million, right? But how can you achieve how will you make the proof, the evidence that you scale? What's the...
How will we scale? Is that really
No, I mean, well, when you start something like that, it's very disruptive, it's new, but it's a niche of a niche.
It is.
Right? I would love to use...
Sure.
So
I think I understand your question. Sure. Well, the answer is pretty simply, from the outset, you sort of have to define what success means, right? We've been very public and open about the fact that at Silvercar, we don't want to be a 20 or 25% share player in an airport, right? Which is typically the goal of a lot of the incumbents in those airports. We're shooting for a smaller segment, sort of a 5% segment is probably the right number, and we've designed the company and focused it on a core demographic that really is that group. So with a combination of operational simplicity as well as some pretty elegant mobile technology that allows things to happen both for the customer easily, but for us much more easily, we believe that we're gonna be able to demonstrate pretty quickly the store economics, certainly in our first market. And then once that happens, it's simply a matter of expanding to more stores.
Great. I think we're being given the hook from the side, so appreciate the questions, and thank you very much to our panel.
Thanks.